live from Denver. It's Sunday afternoon, and here we are for another episode of Critical Q&A. Thank you for joining me. You have a lot of streaming options and activities you could be doing on your Sunday, and I'm glad you're spending some time with little old me. So let's go ahead and, as we are getting going here, let's go ahead and set up the chat. So we have the Q&A set up here. So let me, one moment, please, while I do this little thingy here. Start that Q&A, please. Put your questions under this comment or something like that. Anyway, start Q&A. All right. There we go. Okay, and now I can see the Q&A box there. Oh, let's switch over to the host and chat so I can see the chat as well. That's what I needed to do. All right, so now we've got everything up on the screen the way we're supposed to. Yeah, actually, that's not Benson in the background that you're hearing. That is the dogs next door that I have to listen to all day long because they have a couple of them over there. One of them being sort of Chihuahua type dog. And they are loud and feisty and aggressively irritating, unlike Benson, who does not actually run around barking very often. Sometimes he does, and we'll pull him back in, but not like those guys next door. We have dogs on every house around us. There are dogs of varying degrees of behavior. Let's put it that way. Okay. Okay, excellent. Questions rolling in the Q&A box here. I wanted to get, I had an idea. This word doesn't make a lot of sense, but I wanted to throw it out anyway. I was thinking an awful lot the last few days about that whole Taco Bell thing I was telling you guys about with, how do you, this thing that I think more than just me out there have experienced, this thing where you have to kind of experience something horrible a number of times before it finally gets through that maybe this is something you shouldn't be doing with yourself or with your life or choosing to do. We know whether it's eating junk food or smoking or doing some other thing or, whatever, too much of a good thing. And I was thinking of words to describe this because I don't know what the word is for that. I don't know if there is a word for that, when you finally get sick enough of a thing that you finally are able to step away from it and not go back to it. And so I was thinking maybe, again, this doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but I think it does at the same time. And the word I was thinking is repulsicivism. How about that for a coined word? Repulsicivism. Instead of recidivism, just repulsicivism, to put there the fact that you are absolutely repulsed by this thing, and so there will be no more recidivism is sort of the idea that I had. Anyway, if you guys know better words out there. Oh, and I wanted to share with you, because I'm all about the dad jokes, and I heard a great one today that I wanted to share with you guys, which is... did you know that every time you brush your teeth, you are actually, it's the only way during your life that you can clean your skeleton? That's kind of fun. Okay. Emotionally convinced. Yes, that would be a good phrase for it. Emotionally convinced, Stuart. That's right. Yeah. Thanks, Jeremy, on my shirt. Okay, let's go ahead and... see about answering some questions. How about we get around to that, huh? Okay. I'm not sure. Let's go start throwing them up. Okay, will you have Ian Rafalko again? I mean, if Ian wants to come back on my channel or show, I'll talk to him again, but he's kind of got his own thing going, and I don't think he's too interested in that. But I'd be happy to have him on again. Yeah. Okay, let's carry on here. Does Q&A stand for quality and assurance? No, not how I use it, but I guess it could. Ex-Scientologists asks, Are there 10,000 OT7s yet? How many do you think there are? Didn't they say recently that they were coming up on 10,000? If we look at how, I think they've gotten close. I think. But I am only going off of their own promotional materials. One thing I never did have direct access to were flags statistics, the numbers that are produced by the Flag Service Organization in Clearwater. It's kind of its own beast. And it's managed directly by the International Liaison Office, the ILO. They have guys at upper middle management directly handling the Flag Service Org. It's not managed by a continental management office, if you guys remember the Scientology management structure. And so and I was over Western United States, and so even the Eastern United States guys don't have access to the flag numbers. So that being said, I only put that out there because all we have to go on are what the flag promotional materials tell us. And they've been pumping 10,000 OT7s, 10,000 people onto and through OT7 for a couple decades now. This has been a very long-term target that Scientology has been pushing for the purpose of, as we've talked about before, flipping the theta and theta ratio and sort of turning the corner on planetary clearing. The idea being that if there are 10,000 people, which sounds like such an impressive number, until you realize that we're on a planet with 8 billion plus people, and 10,000 is not even a drop in the bucket. It's a tiny, insignificant number of people compared to the size of the population of the planet. And so, but this number sounds so impressive. And if there's one thing about Scientology and its numbers, it's all about sounding impressive, not actually doing something effective or useful. That was one of the things I learned that really started like separating me from what was going on in the Sea Org and Scientology, was realizing that. So, so are there 10,000 OT7s? No, I don't think that there have been since OT7 was first released back in the, the Solo Knots materials and back in the 80s, all the way to now. I don't believe that there have been 10,000 people who have gotten onto it and through it. And a lot of those people who got onto it and through it have left or died off or whatever. So it's a bit of a nebulous concept also, 10,000 OTs on or through OT7. I don't think they expected that they were supposed to finish that target and a whole bunch of them would have died off of old age. I mean, it was sort of the idea, I think, was always that there be 10,000 active OT7s auditing or completed, and that they're moving on to OT8. So that's at least my understanding of that and what I can comment on about it, as little as that is. Okay, and remember, folks, to put your questions in the question box so that I can get them. Once a Witness asks, will Leah and Mike have another show about Scientology? I don't know. Mike is, working on his medical work and handlings, and he's producing his blog, which I think is amazing and admirable. And I'm, Leah's doing whatever Leah's doing. I'm not in like daily communication with her. So I don't know if they're going to be producing more shows or work together. You can always drop Mike a line, by the way, through his blog. So I would encourage you to do that. Maybe he'll answer or respond. He does see the comments that are posted on his daily articles. And so maybe you could ask him about that. Okay. Oh, yeah. This was interesting, this whole thing. Tony and I are going to talk about that. on the Straight Up and Vertical show, because I want to go over that story with him in detail. But apparently Scientology has been trying to sue out of existence or somehow impede the work of and destroy or get rid of the people who are producing the machines that do electroconvulsive therapy. And this is a controversial form of therapy. It's very, as in my own personal experience around it, I've never received it, and I've never I have met a couple of people in my life who have received ECT. I have always been, when I was in Scientology, I was always very much, brah. And since leaving Scientology, I've also been on ECT. I've been pretty down on it. But I have been convinced by reputable people and people who have had direct personal experience with it that it did help them. And I cannot sit here and say it didn't. And that there have been studies that show that, it is not the barbaric practice that it was in, back in the 60s and 70s when it was, exposed as the abusive, sort of for a lot of the abusive practice that it was. In things like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest or the book and then the movie. Anyway, as far as Scientology's war on that goes, all I know is what Tony has reported, and we will be discussing that on that show later. I'll be recording it with him later today. But it's sort of like, it's a very Scientology approach to things, right? Get to the source of the problem, or get to, the thing that will absolutely deal with this, in the same way that they sued and purchased the Cult Awareness Network in the 90s. They just will come up with some solution that is a little bit out of the box that nobody sees coming, and they'll go, right? And that's what they're doing here, apparently. And that's about as much as I think I'll talk about it here. But like I said, check out my show with Tony. All right. Red Pill 3000. Which do you think is more gross, the Florida strip club or the bedding at a homeless shelter? What's the Scientology executive course? Does labeling something hardcore make it better or worse? Oh, great. Good medley questions. So first off, let's see here. Boy, that's a tough first question, actually. I'll go ahead and optimistically say the Florida strip club is more gross than the bedding at a homeless shelter. Okay, the Scientology executive course. Here's a real question. Let me dive into this one for a moment for you guys, because it's interesting. Scientology is certainly interesting for a number of reasons, and the way that it deals with, the way that it's put together training programs and very structured, regimented management systems to run its organizations is something quite unique to Scientology. I have not seen a lot of other cults or even businesses as regimented and high, and sort of the hierarchy and the structure of it so closely defined as it is in Scientology, with a 7-division organizing board that all Scientology organizations use as the basic template for how they organize the activity. And you have these 7 divisions that all are different parts of how a product is supposed to be produced. Hubbard laid it out in a kind of sort of structural assembly line, if you will. And what I mean by that is the idea of the organizing board is that things will flow through the organization and come out the other end different than they were when they started. A person comes in, pays for a course, finds out about a course, pays for the course, does the course, finishes the course, is, quality control checked, and is then sent on his way out back into the field, out into the world, and brings people back in and around and around and around this sort of, you know, theoretical structure assembly line goes. And this is how Scientology orgs, as they say, orgs are composed. Each division of this organizing board has its own volume of policy letters that were sort of collated and put together that dictate or lay out how that organization, how that part of the organization is supposed to run. All the various policies that run, all the duties of all the different staff who are in each division. So division 7 is your executive division. Division 1 is basically your human resources. It's referred to as the Hubbard Communications Office, or HCO. Then you have Division 2, which is your dissemination or sales division, books division. That's where books and services are sold, and customers are kept track of. When you hear about central files and folders and things like that, that's in Division 2. Division 3 is the Treasury Division, where things are paid for and where bills are paid and staff are paid and all that. Division 4 is your Production Division, and whatever product it is that's supposed to be produced, and in the case of Scientology organizations, that is students and pre-clears being, you know, students being trained and pre-clears being audited, but it could be that you're producing widgets or cars or, you know, cheese blocks or, you know, Taco Bell food, right? Like whatever it is you're producing, that's in Division 4. Division 5 is your Quality Control Division, and also the staff training area and staff enhancement, where staff get their auditing or staff get their training. That's all supposed to happen in Division 5. And then Division 6 is your public divisions, or the field, the public, the you know, the external world, and how and staff that interact with and the outside world, promote, disseminate, and also work with Scientologists out in the field to get them to bring people in. And that's basically the structure of a Scientology organization. And the Scientology executive course takes you through all the policies of all the divisions of the Scientology structure. It's called the OEC, or Organization Executive Course. And that is sort of your, you know, sort of big course. Now, that is all changed recently, and I'm not really sure exactly what that looks like now, because Miscavige, and you might be interested in this, I'll go ahead and lay it out for you guys. Miscavige started changing how policies were organized or collated. He also made revisions in the policies themselves, but he also changed the structure of how they are organized, because they have been organized in these books, these green volumes. You've seen them if you've looked online at these OEC volumes. And there is one of these volumes for each division of the organization, and then there is an OEC volume 0, which contains all of the generalized policies for staff members. And that's your basic staff volume. It is how that's referred to. So any staff member needs to know the stuff in OEC volume 0, and then depending on what division you work in, you learn the policies for your division. And then you go on from there to learn the policies of the whole organization. But now they are restructured, where now Miscavige was changing things, where he was instead collating policies based on what they had to do with, rather than what part of the organization they were in. It was what production line do these policies have to do with. In other words, here's all the policies related to letter writing. Here's the production of how, here's all the policies related to the production of letters and outflowing to the public. And let's put all those together. Everything Hubbard ever said about writing letters, he did some lectures on it. He wrote policies on it. Let's put all that together. Let's put it in chronological sequence so you see the development of what Hubbard was thinking when he wrote the policies about all of this. And when you're done reading all of that, you understand the history and development of letter writing in Scientology, all the way up to what's expected of you now, and what the latest and greatest Hubbard's words were about writing letters. So that actually really helped me as a staff member clarify an awful lot of things, just so y'all know. I actually took to that style of organizing policies like a fish to water. It made things make a lot more sense than the way that they had been sort of collated by area of the organization. Because sometimes there were policies, okay, like you're going to sign up a student for classwork. Well, that's going to span, as I mentioned, that's going to span a number of divisions, right? Division 2's involved, 3's involved, 4's involved. When they finish, Division 5 is involved. So all the policies relating to that in chronological order, you'd have to go through 4 or 5 different volumes to find all those policies. So instead, let's sort them and organize them by how we're producing things instead. And that's what Miscavige was in the middle of doing when I left 11 years ago. So now that this whole executive training thing is happening and at Flag, and these people are out there training, apparently they need to have a lot of people through all the training at Flag before they're allowing the teams to come back home. And anyway, that's kind of a whole nother subject from the question you asked. But anyway, there's some information for you about Scientology executive training. And then you asked, does labeling something hardcore make it better or worse? Depends on the context. You know, if I said these are some hardcore Taco Bell tacos, right, that's probably going to be bad. But if I said this was some hardcore Rocky Road ice cream that I'm eating right now, it's probably pretty good, right? So I don't know, context, tone, whatever. Yeah, I think it can be both. All right, let's see. Oh, good. Lots of questions coming in here. Let's see what else we got. Once a Witness asks me, were you starstruck when you met Leah for the Aftermath show? Of course I was. Yes. Of course I was. I mean, she had she had an assistant with her the whole time, and everybody was deferring to her, and she was a producer on the show, not just a person in front of the camera. Anyway, yeah, I was definitely like, for the whole first day that I was flown out there for one day just to do the initial shoot. So yeah, I was just kind of, on pins and needles the whole time. All right. I'm not sure. I guess we're going to find out together here. UNADFI. Let's find out. What is it? I am being asked here. Oh, got it. Yes. Okay. Let's show more on this. The AI overview is giving me some answers here about this question, which is, who is UNADFI, which is an organization, and how are they involved with Scientology, the Paris Olympic Games, and Tom Cruise? Well, UNADFI stands for Union Nationale des Associations des Défense des Families et des Individuals, which is a French anti-cult association. So it's a national association in defense of families and individuals. It was founded in 1974 and is recognized as a public utility association by the French state. They gather information on cults and help and prevent victims. And there is a Wikipedia article on this, which says it's directly subsidized by the French state. And they, acquire information on cult phenomenon and try to help people out. I guess it's France's version of what used to be over here was the Cult Awareness Network, but this is a government-funded or government-sponsored organization trying to do that work of informing the public about what's, how horrible certain cults and groups and organizations can be based on reports and that sort of thing. Sponsored by various ministries. It has been criticized by psychologists and religious specialists as well as from targeted groups. You don't say. You mean people who defend new religious movements? Yeah, exactly. Right here. So the cult-sponsored folks don't like these guys, apparently. And now they've also been criticized for defending conservative values and favoring Catholicism. Okay, fine. So now, as far as their connection with the Paris Olympics and Tom Cruise, all I can say about that is that what I saw or observed is that there were a number of anti-cult groups that tried to speak up and say, hey, glorifying Tom Cruise and connecting him with the Olympic Games is a bit of a travesty, and slap in the face to, human rights advocates and groups that, and the entire spirit of the Olympic Games, right? Being, unity and competition and that kind of thing between countries. Scientology is about the exact opposite of those things. Scientology is quite literally about world domination, as insane as that sounds. And it's insane because it's so out of reach for them and such a stupid goal for them to have. But they have it. So there were a number of groups who were stepping up trying to say, hey, what is going on here? But I believe by the time word got out about that, I guess this was known about, according to Tony's reporting, in France for months and months, they knew about this Tom Cruise thing and were trying to shut it down. But that was, I imagine I'm thinking personally that it was probably a bit of a, mouse squeak in a tornado, right? Like there's so much money and politics involved with the organization of the Olympic Games. And if you're going to have somebody like Tom Cruise come and be part of that, there's a whole machinery, that comes into play. It's not just Tom Cruise walking into a room and signing up a contract or something. I mean, there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes, kind of the same way, there's a lot that goes on when the president's involved in something, right? Not that Tom Cruise is the president, but we're talking about people who live in very rarefied air. And when they're doing things, it's months in advance and this kind of thing. And there's a lot of power and a lot of money involved in their activities. So I don't think the pushback was really sufficient at all to even, weather much of a register on the powers that be who wanted that to happen. That's my personal take on that. I might be wrong, and if I am, I'd be happy to correct the record there. But that's what I think about that. Yeah, it's for sure. France does really hate cults, and yes. Okay, Sam, I'll get to your questions here. Thank you for that super chat. Appreciate it. All right, let's see if they're in here. There it is. Okay, good. Yeah, we will get to that. All right. So here we go. Next one. I'm just taking them in order as I go down the list here. Okay, Ex-Scientologist asks, is critical thinking at odds with or interfere with creative thinking? No. I don't think so. I don't think that they are at odds. Certainly represent, as I understand it, and I don't have like some, special insight on brain anatomy, but as I understand how things work up here, it is different areas of the brain that are sort of lighten up when you're on your creative side versus, maybe more critical thinking side. Not just left, right, but like other, portions. But that's about as much as I know about it, is that different parts light up. I don't think with the way that I think about critical thinking, especially if, okay, let me say this. Let me take advantage of this question to offer this. People have criticized or been openly critical of critical thinking in this community and in other places. And it's a silly thing to be critical of. Because the term or phrase as I use the term critical thinking it represents a whole gaggle of things, a skill set or a set of tools that you can use or utilize that will help you navigate the problems of the world and navigate your own emotional and thinking life in getting through life, right? Critical thinking has to do with understanding structures of logic and reason and what rational thinking is and what basic, problem solving logic is. It's understanding the concept of cause and effect, and that there are consequences to actions, and that there are unintended consequences to actions, and understanding that this is a thing, and that life has some structure you can impose on it, and it allows you to be able to more accurately predict some of those consequences, intended or unintended. It does not make you a perfect person. It does not make you perfectly logical. It does not make you a Mr. Spock. These are impossible states for human beings to be in. But it helps you recognize biases and cognitive fallacies that we all engage in our efforts to make the world make more sense. That's critical thinking. It's not some weird thing. It's a set of information and tools and practices, and it's a discipline, just like martial arts is a discipline. It's a set of practices, but it's also something that you have to practice and think about and apply yourself to if you want to see success with it. It's not something that somebody does to you, And I happen to think, and I've said, that within human critical thinking, if you're gonna be talking about trying to understand or use critical thinking to navigate your own life, or talk about psychology or the mental life of others, then you're going to have to include as part of that critical thinking the emotional intelligence. The fact that we have emotions, that emotions are real, that we are emotionally driven creatures first and logic second. That is the sequence of how we operate and think. So if you're going to be a real good critical thinker when it comes to human beings, you're going to have to know that. And you have to allow for that. And you're going to have to include emotions in your calculations of how people go about thinking and doing things, right? Otherwise, you're going to be endlessly frustrated by the irrational decision-making process of a lot of people a lot of the time. It's irrational only because we're led by our emotions first, and then we're making up reasons why following that, Y'all know about that stuff. Anyway, so is it at odds? So anyway, coming back to this now, is critical thinking at odds with creative thinking? I happen to think that that when it's really being done right or well, I think critical thinking is nothing but a bonus and an assistance to creative thinking. That's what I think. I think the two things go together quite well. So that's my take on that. Okay. Hope that makes sense. Oh, yeah. Okay. Once a witness asks, are there areas of a Scientology org, you're asking, that the public cannot go into? What happens if I go into the office of LRH and sit on his chair? Yeah. You're going to get kicked out. In very short order too. They're not going to mess around with that. In fact, usually they even have a little chain or something in the doorway of the L. Ron Hubbard office so that you get the idea. You're not supposed to walk in there. There are other areas of the organization that are kept locked that you don't have access to generally. The org statistical area, the HCO spaces, any of the personnel areas. The case folders and a lot of the org is off limits to the public, actually, because all the auditing spaces and the place where auditing is coordinated and managed on a day-to-day basis is called the Hubbard Guidance Center. And there's a place in there called Technical Services, and that area is kind of a buzz all the time. They're the ones who are calling people in and getting them going and scheduled and all that, and making sure that when they show up, they get connected up with their auditor and get into session. So they're kind of like the coach. If the auditors are the team players, you know, then the tech services is the coach, right? Directing the traffic and getting everything scheduled and stuff like that. So no public are going into any of those areas. And those are all off limits, because that's where all the PC folders are, for example. The ethics spaces, those are all off limits, because that's where all the ethics files are. The course rooms, of course, are wide open for the public. The executive offices are pretty off limits. They don't want people just wandering around in those offices or in those areas. Let's see, any place else? Obviously the sales office. Oh, the inventory spaces, the book stocks. No, you don't want public going around back there. Those are all kept locked up. So yeah, those are what I can remember off the top of my head here. All right, let's carry on. Once a Witness asks, would Melissa make an obedient Scientologist or a rebellious one? Let's see here. Melissa would not make a good Scientologist. She would be too critical of certain things, and she absolutely, yeah. Anyway, no, she would not be a good Scientologist. She would be rebellious. Yeah, I'll just put it that way. I think that would be the case. Oh, what an interesting question. Do you ever get a chance to talk with kids as opposed to adults? What do you talk about? I wish I had more chances to. I like kids. And I think babies make the world go round. I just love little babies. But talk to my nephew and my niece, right? My niece is not really quite totally up to talking yet, so it's really just kind of sounds on the other end of the phone. Met her once, and she, you know, when I went out there months ago. But anyway, but Cooper, yeah, my nephew's kind of fun to talk to. He's interesting. Yeah, but I really actually don't get to talk to kids very much at all. It's really not in my life to do that. So yeah. I don't really have a lot else to say about that. Okay, Mamaki 1987. Do you watch the news about the rallies? Do you think Trump is losing his followers because of the way he is acting? Is it typical for a cult leader when they might lose? Okay, great questions. Thank you. I have seen clips from Trump rallies for years. I have never sat down and watched an entire Trump rally from beginning to end, but I have watched long segments of them numerous times, unfortunately, enough times to very much get the idea of who and what, you know, that guy is about when it comes to his public speaking. And I mean, you know, it's embarrassing, to be honest with you, as an American, that there are other Americans who look at this man standing there speaking at the level of a third and fourth grader, and, you know, with worshipful adoration in their eyes. It's really quite it's bad. I don't want to say it's a sickness implying that there's some mental illness going on there, but it's almost indistinguishable from mental illness in some ways when you have this, you know, this extreme level of cult adoration, this love that people have for this man is so misplaced and so misguided. So is he losing followers now? Some of them, yes, absolutely he is, for a number of reasons that I've seen across social media, from his, you know, obvious mental decline, especially after Biden dropped out. It became abundantly clear how embarrassing he was. He rambles and rambles and rambles. There is no other word to describe what Donald Trump does on a microphone. He rambles, and he does it a lot, and in such a way that the ideas that he's putting together and communicating, even when you really sit and listen and grant him all the benefit of the doubt and really try to, okay, where's he coming from? What is he trying to say? they're crazy town ideas. Like he puts, you know, anyway, when he started talking about Hannibal Lecter and like that kind of stuff, that's what I'm talking about, crazy town stuff. So is he losing followers for that? Yes, he is. And there are also other reasons that he's losing followers having to do with Project 2025, which we have been talking about quite a bit on this channel. That has everything to do with why he's losing a lot of people right now, and he should be, just for reasons having to do with that. And is it typical for a cult leader when they might lose? I guess you mean is it typical for them to start acting the way he's acting, which is basically more desperate, more mad, more sort of aggravated, might be a good word to use. Apparently, the reports are, you know, behind the scenes, he's raging at people, throwing things, stuff like this, because he's so upset about the poll numbers. And he's not, you know, he doesn't like losing, and he doesn't like not being number one. You know, that's kind of his ego trip. So, and that's cult leader ego trip, right? That's just straight up, all of them. That's what narcissism is all about. And I feel safe using that word. I'm not diagnosing Trump. He's been diagnosed by professionals who know far more about it than I do. But, you know, I can certainly describe him as predatory. And do they start losing it now? You know, at this phase of things, once they've peaked in popularity, in getting the adoration that they so crave, once that peak point has passed and they recognize that it has passed, and it has for Trump, that ship has sailed. His time is over. It's a downward slope now. And it's really a question of, it kind of like with Scientology. Scientology's peaked. It's had its day. That day came and went. It's not coming back. There is nothing Scientology can do to come back. Neither can Trump. Not at this point. Because his mental decline is real. It's not a figment of my imagination, and it's not my left-wing bias speaking here. It's obvious to anybody who just looks at the man and listens to him talk. So some of his followers wake up from that. Let's remember, it's mostly moral outrages that are going to wake people up and snap them out of relationships that they are in, that they don't want to be in, including with their cult leader. Moral outrages are a real big a break point for most people most of the time when it comes to how they snap out of it. And there have been a lot of moral outrages around Trump for a very, very, very long time. There's you know, Jacob Marley's got nothing on this guy when it comes to the chains of sin that this guy's carrying around with him. So there's a lot there to be outraged about. And I think it's starting to also become clearer to people as certain pieces of information pierce the Fox News Trump MAGA bubble world, because it is a bubble world. We realize that these are people who are very encapsulated in a reality bubble that is not reality. That's all cults, right? And that is Trump a cult. Now, not everybody who supports Trump, like I've gone out of my way to say all the time, not everybody who supports Trump is in the cult of Trump, but the cult is real. It's there. You know, these red hat, flag flying, you know, they got pictures on the back of their truck of Biden or Kamala tied up, you know, being killed and stuff. I mean, these are extreme radicalized, semi-radicalized people. And that part of it is very much a cult. And even there, they're losing people. So that's what I know. I can't talk numbers. I don't know how much they're losing yet, but they are. And from all the sort of red flags that I see in his behavior, I see him daily becoming more and more desperate. I mean, he's tweeting at 2:30 in the morning. He's really kind of shaken right now. Donald Trump is. Apparently, well, we don't need to go there. I'm just going to say all that. Okay. And that's about as much as we'll say on it. I'll say this, though, in terms of moral outrages, just since you asked the question and since we're on the topic, and you all know I love talking about this stuff. as far as I'm concerned, the conversation is over when it comes to Donald Trump on one thing. And this is why I'm not going to go on some big roll here. I'm just going to say this one thing. And this piece of information is finally starting to pierce the bubble over there. But Donald Trump has been found in a court of law under legal, in a fully legal trial, right? In a civil trial, liable for rape. He has been found in a court to be a rapist. The conversation is over at that point. There shouldn't be any yeah, but. There is no yeah, but to a statement like that. And it is a fact. The judge on the case has issued a statement that says as much. Okay? That's the reality of that man. There shouldn't be any more conversation after that. And if there is, I really, truly think that whoever would support somebody who is a known, recognized, legally, recognized rapist, you really should give that a second thought if that's what you're supporting, because it's really, really bad. Okay, let's move on. Oh, great question. Stuart Gorman, what are some things that you think Hubbard would have made up for OT levels past 8? Okay, some of this was actually earlier OT levels that I think Hubbard would have resuscitated had he still been around. There were the original OT levels were different. OT 1, 2, and 3 prior to Xenu were, back up. OT 1, 2, and 3 come out in the 60s. Then there is this period where there is OT 3X, like OT 3 expanded. And there was an OT 4, 5, 6, and 7 that were different than the OT 4, 5, 6, and 7 that are out now. And I can't remember as I sit here right now exactly what was on the original OT 4, 5, 6, and 7, but it was not what's there now. It was not the OT drug rundown and new aerodynamics for OTs. That all came in 1977, 78 time period, when there was this big redo and the OT levels got redone. And those earlier OT levels don't get done anymore, and there's some stuff on there that I think Hubbard could resuscitate. That's why I got to go round and round on this to get to that point. There are also things in the book called The Creation of Human Ability. There are a series of processes that are called Route 2 processes that have to do with exteriorization and auditing somebody who is exterior. And there's a thing, for example, called the Grand Tour, where you are exteriorized from your body, be 3 feet back of your head, and now go to Mars, go to Jupiter, right? Tell me how's the sun looking today? Like flit about in the solar system. Just go take a tour. There might be stuff like that. But you could make up so many things to do with a Thetan, So it's really sky's the limit, right? I mean, anything goes. But I think he would have gone back to look at some of that earlier stuff and dredge that up. And if I had access to the references here right now, which I don't, I kind of took my entire Scientology library and I lost a bunch of it in a hard drive thing, and then I just haven't gone and put it back together because I'm not going to dive into those details like that. And again, for any video work or anything. So it's really just what I remember these days. And when it comes to that stuff, I don't remember tons. But like Grand Tour, stuff like that, check out, if you're really curious about it, check out that book, The Creation of Human Ability, because it's packed with processes. R245, that joke process about shooting somebody and exteriorizing them, that's where that comes from, is from that book. Okay. Young Matador, hey Chris, ever thought of going on one of Tony Ortega's group therapy podcast episodes, or are you too cool for all of that? No, I'm not too cool at all. I'd be happy to. I just haven't been asked because Tony and I do our weekly show, so I think he's featuring other people. But that's his podcast, so if he wants to have me on there, he'll ask me. Okay. Ex-Scion, do you still remember when significant Scientology dates are, like LRH's birthday and Sea Org Day? When was Sea Org Day? Yeah, good question. Because I don't remember the exact dates. What I remember is that Sea Org Day is sometime in August. It might be this weekend. I just can't remember. But it's sometime in August. And Auditors Day is in September. Let's see. Significant dates. July has the sailing of the Free Winds because of the, the maiden voyage anniversary events we always knew about mid-July. The L. Ron Hubbard's birthday is March 13th. May 9th is the anniversary of the publication of Dianetics, the Modern Science of Mental Health. Let's see. There is a Scientology calendar that has dates for when every org opened originally. Again, I don't have that, but that data is out there. But significant events or dates in history for Scientologists tend to only really be Hubbard's birthday, anniversary of Dianetics. Auditors Day used to be a lot bigger of a deal than it is now. 30, 40 years ago, it was a major event, and now it's a yawn. So Auditors Day used to be something, but now it's not. New Year's, of course, because it's New Year's and they do a big event. I think there's the IAS anniversary also, which I think is in October. Yeah. Yeah, those are the ones I know about. Okay. Now, this is a question I like. I mean, not that I don't like your other questions, guys, but wow, this is an interesting one. What are your stable datums that you've built your world on? All right. So the term stable datum comes out of Scientology. And the idea is that it is the kind of information or data that would be foundational for you, right? Like that it would be like the underpinning pieces of information or the attitudes or whatever it is you're building something on. A stable datum is supposed to be something that doesn't change a lot. It's stable. And you can therefore, rely on it. So stable data, I built my world around. Helping people is a good activity, is a good thing to do. That's a stable datum that I have. You'd be surprised. Some people don't. Some people think the exact opposite. Human rights are the most fundamental rights we have, and we have them just because we are human. I believe that is a stable datum that I operate on. That's how I kind of think about people, or think about what people should have or have the right to. I think to things like the Universal Declaration of Human Rights as a guiding document, or set of principles for what are human rights. That fits for me. That's a good take on it. Doesn't necessarily have to be the be all end all of everything that's ever been said about human rights. There is an entire effort right now that one of my friends is working on around freedom of thought as a human right. But that's right now we're just trying to deal with health and welfare and travel being human rights. Good luck with freedom of thought. But more power to him, right? I mean, it's a good thing to push for. Human rights are very, very sacred to me, so I would consider those stable data that I've built my life on. I believe things like, I do. I know I don't always demonstrate it, but I do believe in the end that love wins and that love conquers hate. I think that's a piece of a foundation that I return to, even if there are times when I stray from that or forget or get, incensed or angry, and might dwell there for days or weeks at a time. I feel each of those times has been a learning experience for me, returning me back to that stable, oh yeah, you really didn't need to dive off that cliff. You could have stayed here and it would have been fine, kind of thing. As far as taking those leaps into rage, right? Into like anger because people, trigger or incite me or whatever. It's not like you have choices all the time when it comes to that stuff. But again, I'm talking longer term. What you asked that I've built my life around or my world on. That is one. That's one I continually return back to. That it's the right thing to do. That kindness is the thing that wins. And this is this is why I had it tattooed on me, right? Is so I would never forget it, because sometimes you do. It's chaos. Be kind, right? I think that's a brilliant principle to build a life around, and I try to practice that more often than not. I think that people are. I don't think that people are basically good. I don't think that there's some inherent little white light that exists within us that is this little thing of goodness. I don't think about people that way, but I do think that one of the stable data that I do have is that people want to get along. That I believe is absolutely true. I think in any group of people that you will sort through, if you gathered any group from any region in the world, or mix of people, even medley of people, and you put them together, I think 100% of the time, the majority of people in that room are going to be people who want to work together, who want to get along. And I think you're going to find a percentage of people who are not that way and will work against that, kind of dedicatedly, but more people want to do that. And I think that them acting to get along and try to cooperate and try to work together and try to be empathetic with each other, I think that is goodness. I think that is our inherent goodness, but it can be overrun by certain predatory types or by certain circumstances or contexts, right? When there's emergencies or, severe threats, environmental threats, whatever, people start losing their damn minds individually and they can tear each other apart and it can get really ugly. We all have that in us too. But I think given that there's not some hammer over your head or some extreme emergency dictating immediate action on the part of every single individual, right? I think lacking that, which is most of the time, people want to get along. Okay, so there's that. And let's see if there's anything else to this answering this one. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Maybe one of the more important ones of all. My stable data about morality or whatever is that this is the only shot we're going to get. There's one lifetime. This is what you get. And so make the most of it, make the best of it. Don't rely on some second time around or some afterlife, or live for that. Don't live for that, for some dream. Live for now. Live for your time here, and and that doesn't mean be a selfish asshole either. That means living for other people too. It means, being the good person, but goodness is its own reward, right? That kind of thing, like that. I think these are important things. Yeah. So I'll say that too. Okay. That's what I'll say. All right. Okay, Once a Witness asks, are most people who live at Big Blue over 50 or 60? Not too many young people. I don't know. I don't know what the breakdown on ages are at Big Blue at this point. When I was there, it was mostly older people. I'll say that. Over 50 and 60, no. Plenty of 20, 30, 40s. I can't say off the top of my head what the age breakdown, demographic breakdown is for Big Blue. I'd be guessing, you know. I knew everybody there, but things changed over time, and I don't have the numbers accurate in my head. And there's one thing we don't think well with, it's numbers. So I don't want to give you guys, I don't want to throw some bullshit out there. There's a lot of young people in PAC, right? There's a lot of second gen, third gen, fourth gen at this point in Scientology, and they make up a lot of the Sea Org. You know, it's hard to say. Don't know. Once a witness asked this: is electroshock legal in all 50 states? Do children get electroshocked? Yes, I believe electroshock, ECT, electroconvulsive therapy, is legal in all 50 states. I'm not aware of it being illegal anywhere. If I'm wrong, correct me. I'm not a problem. But I'm not aware of it being an illegal practice anywhere. And do children get electroshocked? I know there are circumstances where it might be called for, but I don't know. I don't think there's any prohibition on it. But I think it would be incredibly context specific when it comes to something like that. As I understand it, ECT is a measure of almost last resort in almost all circumstances. I don't know anyone these days who goes right to ECT. If there are such practitioners, I would say they're malpractitioners, because there are other things you can do before you get to ECT. Lots of things. But there are very specific circumstances or conditions that have not changed until ECT was done. And it's not like I like that fact, but I can't argue against it. It's true. But we're talking about a handful of cases here. We are not talking about a broad use of this technology, right? This methodology. And I'm not aware of children receiving it. I've not seen that or heard of that. I'm just know that I'm leaving myself open to the possibility of it, because I can conceive of circumstances where a minor, not necessarily a child, I don't know about brain development when it comes to ECT. I just don't know. But I would imagine it's probably, again, sort of last resort kind of thing. But I could imagine brain situations where you might have epileptic situations, or you might have other brain conditions that call for, some kind of shakeup like that. Again, unexpert opinion on that. Okay, here we finally get to Sam's question. Sam Slade asks, did you have any interactions with Ray Mithoff? He's mocked by David Miscavige for forgetting what LRH told him about the upper levels at the ranch, yet some think he is perhaps the nicest guy of the upper execs. Very true. I not only met and interacted with Ray Mithoff a few times, and he was always super, super nice to me. It wasn't a personal relationship. We weren't friends. It wasn't we didn't have a connection. He was just a very senior person, and I was, kind of in the technical areas somewhat under him. Wrote to him a couple times with questions about things. But I have heard from a number of people, my parents included, who knew him before he was in the Sea Org, who knew him way back in the 70s when he first got in. Mitch Brisker talked about him. My parents have talked about him to me. Other people I've met and worked with all the way up to now have talked about Ray Mithoff and when they used to know him. So I feel I have some insight into who he is through those anecdotes, and he is a super nice guy. And always intended, kind of one of those straight shooter, wanted things to go well, wanted people to do well, was really into the tech. I guess was being, became senior CS, senior case supervisor international for a period of time. He was the senior tech guy. And super nice guy. That's what I can say about Ray, without any question. I mean, really. And at this point, probably as broken as Heber and Guillaume and the other int execs, Mark Ingber, Mark Yeager, you know, these long-term guys who did some, they all, now let's not, now that all being said, let's not forget that we have, that these guys, including Ray Mithoff, sat in rooms doing gangbang sex checking, yelling and screaming at people, extorting them during the Mission Network fiasco back in the 1980s. You know, Mithoff was there when Miscavige rose to power and was part of that inner circle. And I'm not saying he is an evil person because he enabled Miscavige. You had to. It was survival. But he did things that were not cool. So yes, I do know he's a really, really super nice guy, but I also know he was involved in a set of circumstances that were absolutely very abusive and horrifying for people who had to experience them. And he didn't stop that. He took part in it. So, you know, so that's there. That's part of his story too, just like it's part of mine and all of us other cult members, right? But I just kind of had to say that to make sure we're clear that, you know, like John Travolta, super nice guy, but, you know, it's off the goddamn rails. Yeah. So anyway, there you go. All right. But at this point, quite honestly, as I'm sitting here talking to you live right now, Ray Mithoff is quite seriously probably a very broken man. You know, and that's really sad. I do feel for that. Just like Heber and the other guys, you know, they weren't all bad. They were weaponized empaths. And we've talked about weaponized empathy and how dangerous that is and how destructive it is to the empaths. They're good people, but you know, they get taken advantage of and used up. You get used up. Yeah. Okay. Oh, yes, I did, young Matador. Did you read about the Church of Scientology similar approach made by Disney regarding an arbitration approach to a lawsuit? I hope other corporations realize how boneheaded a move this looks publicly. COS never will. You are absolutely right. Disney, the House of Mouse, has fallen, and boy, have they fallen. Man, I mean, it's bad. It's real bad. Disney is, yeah, I got a lot to say about Disney. But I won't say it all here today right now, except to say that how far have they fallen? Well, they must have the same lawyers as Scientology now, because that's what they're doing. And how gross is that, right? It's disgusting that you would have a wrong, as I understand it, there's a wrongful death lawsuit, and Disney is trying to get it dismissed because the guy who died signed the terms of service with Disney Plus, the entertainment channel, so that they would have to go to mediation or arbitration, which is a duplicate carbon copy move of what the Church of Scientology is doing to its abused victims. And if you want to see me get mad, right, this is one of the ways to see me get mad, because my blood gets boiling over stuff like this. I get really upset about this level of injustice and this level of abusive predatory practices. And I don't care who's doing it. If it's Scientology or if it's Disney, it is equally evil. It is so grossly irresponsible. It is such a gross kind of, it's a kind of Darvo. It's similar. It's along the same logic train as Darvo, right? Here's Disney. Oh, no. We didn't do anything wrong. In fact, you're the one who signed this terms of service here. So in fact, we don't owe you anything. We're the victims here. How dare you come after us, right? It's that flow. I'm not saying it's exactly that, because it's not exactly that, but it's, you know, it leans in that direction. It's psychotic, right? It's very narcissistic stuff. It's, I have no responsibility for the wrongdoing I've perpetrated against you. I stand here blameless, and there's nothing you can do about it. That right there is the part that I find infuriating. It's not okay. And Disney should be grossly ashamed of themselves for even thinking of using that as a legal strategy. And I hope I hope that they are gutted as a corporation for even considering it. Those are my feelings on it. I have very strong feelings about organizations that abuse their power. Disney is a multi-billion-dollar company. This lawsuit is a yawn for them. They could do a settlement and pay out and not miss anything. It would be 0.000001, percent of nothing for them to pay out some poor widow whose husband dies because Disney's negligent, right? But oh, no. Can't have any of that, because then we might be held responsible for all of our accidents and problems and issues that we create with our cheapskatedness and our, disregard for safety regulations and other things, by this long line of lawsuits that are going to come after us. So, so we're going to game the system so that no one can ever come after us. This is really gross, right? And it's the state of things in the U.S. right now when it comes to corporate law, and it needs a redo, man. We need a redo so bad on this. We need reform of contract law and arbitration law. It has been nothing but abused by these corporations and by cults. It's just not okay. All right. Wish I had more than emotions for you on that, right? But it's just wrong. I don't know what else to say. All right, Sam Slade. Regarding your extensive research on the e-meter, would it be fair to say that the e-meter is a tool for detecting stress? That is not a lie detection device or a spiritual tool, but a simple gauge of stress. Well, here's the thing, okay? And this is why the meter is so open to... is why people misunderstand this thing, okay? Let me put it this way. A reaction on an e-meter could mean a lot of different things. And it doesn't just mean stress. I wouldn't use that word to describe. I mean, we could use that word, but it's more than that. Like, for example, if you think of somebody disagreeing as a kind of stress, then okay, right? But I wouldn't necessarily think of it that way. It's a reaction that happens because of a change in the electrical conductivity of the skin. Why does the skin change electrical conductivity? Because of chemical processes in the body, because of muscle tension, and because of sweat. And that's it. There are no other reasons. It's those three things and a combination of those three things. What causes changes in electrical conductivity, what causes change in sweat, and what causes change in muscle tension is thinking, eating, moving, reacting to things, instinctive responses, right? Reflexes, hormone, chemical changes in the body. These are what change this. So what causes those things? Lots of stuff. Random thoughts you're having can create a response on an e-meter. A happy day you had one time. Remembering something that you had forgotten for a long time. You happen to be holding the cans. Boing. Over goes that needle. Does that mean it's reading on stress? No. You're having a happy thought. But there's that reaction on the needle, right? Because you had a little micro tension in your muscles when you remembered that. Or there's a little bit more micro sweat comes out on the palms, right? Remember, you have thousands of sweat receptors here. Thousands of them. More here than anywhere else on the body. Your feet and your hands, right? Your palms. So that's what's causing the reaction. And the trick with the needle, with the meter, is discovering and interpreting what caused it. Where's that reaction coming from? So maybe it's stress and maybe it's not, right? That's why I'm going to be all like hyper exact in my answer on that, right? Because I don't want you thinking it's just stress, because it's not. And that's one of the reasons why it is wholly unusable. It's not just unreliable, it doesn't work. It just doesn't, not for what Scientologists are using it for. right? It's not good for that. Yeah. All right. Let's carry on. Ex-Scientologist, a friend called me and said she didn't have much charge, but just wanted to say hi. I thought she meant emotional charge, but she meant the charge on her phone. Have you had similar experience? Yes, I have. Trying to think of it. Let's see here. I have. I can't think of anyone right now. I'm sorry. I wish I could. Sometimes when I'm on the spot, I just can't think of examples. I'll think of like 5 after the show, you know. But this does happen. Yeah, as this absolutely does happen. I'll get Scientology terms and stuff. Like I can't, okay, I'll give you, okay. I can't hear the word misunderstood. I can't hear that word because I barely ever hear anybody say it. It's not a common word, right? Misunderstood. It's used, but it's not used daily. It's not used weekly. It pops up here and there. So when I hear it, you know, I still think misunderstood word. And I still have to, yeah, right? That sometimes at least that happens. Yeah, that happens. That happens. Let's see if there's any others. Because that doesn't happen with bank at all. That never happens. Even though bank is a big word in Scientology for reactive mind, right? Even reactive doesn't, even that is a really key word in Scientology, but that doesn't set off any bells for me. I've listened to it and heard it so many times over the years since leaving that it's not a charged word for me anymore. Yeah. Yeah, it happens. It happens. I don't think there's anything wrong with it happening, by the way. I mean, it's just our brain and its connections, right? So what are you going to do? Not much. But don't worry about it either, you know, if it's happening to you. Just roll with it. All right. Okay, once a witness also, you got a lot of questions. These are great. Will Scientology go to extreme measures to deal with the protesters? Are they still capable of acting criminally against the protesters? No, they don't have to. The protesters are undoing themselves, right? In fact, as I understand it, they're pretty much dead in the water at this point. I mean, I don't know, just what I, glance at pretty much once a week at this point. But I don't think these protests are really doing much of anything at this point as far as Scientology is concerned, other than what we've already discussed, which is that they adjust, they adapt. Scientology, like at PAC, at Big Blue, they have the tunnels, so they'll just start using the tunnels, and they'll just create routes around, and they'll avoid the protesters, and then OSA and security will be assigned to watch those people like a hawk. Right, record them. Every move that the protesters make on the base is being recorded, and get license plate numbers and do facial recognition, and and follow these people home and do all the things that Scientology does. And I understand there have been some court cases and restraining orders filed and stuff and fought over, and I don't know where all that stands. I'm not keeping track of that at that level anymore. Well, I was never really keeping track of it that day by day, but it's but Scientology doesn't have to go to extreme measures. All they have to do is wait these people out. And they have. I mean, it only took a few months. It's not like these protesters were really serious about taking down Scientology. That's not how you do it. And it was just, it just is what it was. It was a lot of noise that generated an awful lot of interest and attention. And it's pretty much moved on, hasn't it? Right? Where are we at now? Has Scientology shut down in LA? No. Has Scientology shut down anywhere? No. It's still going strong. Protests are good for attracting attention for short bursts. That's what they're good for. But they're part of a bigger campaign. And unless you're organizing that bigger campaign, in and of itself, the protests aren't going to stop anything. It's not how it works. So Scientology knows that. They've been through protests before, right? And they know they just got to wait these people out, and they'll fall apart internally, which they did. And of course, Scientology also will enter its own little, agent provocateurs into the scene. So they don't have to go into extreme actions. They just have to go into their usual crafty, let's create division. Let's create factions. Let's get these people fighting each other. I mean, did you think they don't do that anymore? Of course they did that with the protesters. I guarantee you 1 or 2 people in that group of people in LA are absolutely OSA influenced. No question about it. Right? I don't know which one. I don't have to know. I just know it happens because I know what Scientology does. And when it comes to certain things, Scientology is really good at their job. They really suck in other ways. They are horrible at other things. But there's some things they're really good. Gotta watch for that. All right. Okay, Once a Witness also asks, when you were a child, was Scientology fun for you or was it strict to you? I'm kind of thinking it was not fun. It was more strict. Scientology wasn't something I thought of as fun. That's for damn sure. I did, when I was a kid, when I was single digit still, right, in age, I did a child's communications course. I did upper indoctrination TRs where you're yelling at the ashtray. I didn't know what that was all about, but I did it. I hung around the org a lot, or hung around the Pasadena Mission a lot. It wasn't an org. And at home, Scientology was enforced on me through word clearing and ethics. When I got into trouble with people or at school or I got sick, it was ethics, right? I got a PTS handling and I had to determine who the suppressive was. And I had to do a handling or a disconnect, right? And I always had to figure out, some handling for this bully who was bullying me. And it was the same guy over and over again, right? Because he was the same SP, and every time I got sick, it was assumed this guy was bullying me, right? Well, he was always bullying me, so it kind of worked out. And I would do these PTS handlings that would never do anything to stop the bullying, because the only thing that was going to stop this guy from bullying me was a punch in the face. And I wasn't up to giving it to him. I was younger than him, smaller than him, and I wasn't a fighter. So that wasn't going to happen. And so I continued to get bullied by him. And these ethics handlings that I would get, and this went on from school year to school year to school year, all through from 2nd to 5th grade. And no, 6th, 7th or 8th grade. I had the same Boy Scout troop the whole time. Same bully. Yeah, same bullies. Actually. Anyway, that happened. And more in terms of answering your question about strict, I remember a couple times where my mom got really, really down on me about misunderstood words and making sure I knew what the words were that I was reading. And there were a couple times where we spent hours and breaking me down into tears and crying and like not wanting to do this anymore and going well beyond that into just almost I don't want to paint too black a picture, but it was not fun. I really did not enjoy those times, and I would be in tears. It was not fun. And it was so funny too, because I grew up absolutely loving to read. It just came to me naturally. I was very good at it. I wasn't great at math. I certainly wasn't good socially. I wasn't horrible. I had friends, but I wasn't, the class clown or popular. I was never that guy. And math was not impossible. I was just kind of average at it. But reading and writing, I was so good right away at it. And none of what my mom did ever helped that. It only made it worse and only made me hate reading and writing more. And I didn't hate them, so I didn't want to hate them, and so I kind of pushed through it because it was such a thing that I loved doing. Had I not loved it as much as I did, those efforts on my mom's part could have absolutely killed any interest I had in reading and writing. It was that bad. I was having like really bad afternoons with her, you know, trying to understand these words and provide her with answers she wanted. She was asking me things like the definition of the word as. I'm 8 years old, and she's asking me for the definitions of grammar terms, right? That I don't have my head wrapped around it all yet, but I'm reading and I'm understanding, but I can't define these joining words and, you know, and conjunctions and things like that. I don't have it yet. I'm 8. Doesn't matter. You're supposed to know the definition of every word that you read, you know? It became a kind of abuse as far as I'm concerned, right? And I like I said, I don't consider my parents abusive people, but Scientology is an abusive practice. And like I said, if I didn't have a natural bent for it, I would never wanted to pick up a book again. And you know, it was yeah, I did not enjoy that, and neither did my brother. He didn't have a natural bent for it, and the word clearing stuff didn't help him at all. Not even like a little bit. And my parents spent way more time with him than they did with me on that stuff. And it wasn't any good for him either. Okay. Okay, good. Joe DeCeppo. I watched your Friday night show on replay and found it very interesting when you talked about cultish ways of thinking that persist after the cult. Do you have any further examples? Sure. Let's see. Okay, I think we've talked about ego issues where you come out and you're still, you know, the world is supposed to look the way I expect it to look, right? We talked about that. You're continually running into conflict with people because you're sure your way is the best way, and how dare they think otherwise? Like, what? It's just a habit you have, right? It's just so sure. You're just so sure. And boy, that takes a while to break down. At least it did for me. Let's see. Emotional stuff. Ways of thinking that persist after the cult. Psychiatry is bad, right? Or mental health is bad, or getting help from anybody other than this group, this cult, this activity is bad, right? Any shade thrown on other help or activities that help or assist, nah, they suck. They're bad. They're horrible. They don't help. Even Tom Cruise got up to this, right? Those first responders, the emergency guys, they don't know what the hell they're doing. We're the experts, right? I mean, that kind of thing can persist long after you're out of the cult. Wrong-headed, other fear induction can hang around a long time, right? Fear of psychiatry, fear of the other, prejudices, fear of LGBT, right? Long after Scientology is gone, people have still held on to those prejudices. Yeah, the emotional suppression, the habit of emotional suppression, of emotional, let's say emotional dysregulation, which is probably a more accurate way of putting it. Scientology trains you to dysregulate, right? To mistreat your emotions, to not process them properly, to suppress them, to let them out when inappropriate times, right? I'm going to give you a face ripping now. Right now it's time for now I have to gird up and get mad at you because I'm going to rip your face off because you did something bad, right? You get these wildly weird emotional stuff you got to do in that group. And so that kind of shit can persist afterwards. It was such a shock to me, just as a point, it still surprises me to this day that the term severe reality adjustment, an SRA, that's a Scientology term, I guess. I thought for sure that term, that phrase existed outside of Scientology and that we imported it. But apparently not. I guess I'm wrong about that. People keep telling me, no, that's not a thing. It's Scientology only. I heard that so many times in Scientology. We use that phrase a lot. Okay. Now, the other things that can persist long after the cult is over are your moral foundations. In fact, I'll go so far as to say the thing that sticks around kind of longest in the unexamined mind is the moral foundations that are established by the cult. The ideas of good and bad, right and wrong. That goes along with the LGBT stuff and the fear induction stuff, because they instill in you that it's a moral problem for you as well as other issues, right? Like the LGBT thing. It's just immoral to be LGBT according to Scientology. It's not just a sort of mental psychosis or issue. It's also a moral failing. You know, there's something really wrong with you if you are LGBT, as far as Scientology is concerned. Well, that kind of attitude, and that attitude towards others, that if, you know, fill in the blank condition exists in you, then you're evil and must be destroyed, right? It's very if-then kind of statements that the cult will install. And those things persist long after cult membership if they're not examined. And they're, because a lot of them are not obviously tied back into the cult. Attitudes toward gender, attitudes toward romantic partners or relationships in general. What does love look like? What is a proper relationship, and how should it look, or how should it be constructed? This is often dictated to the letter by cults. So those habits can persist long after you've left. The idea of how things should be, right? In a way, it kind of falls under that. Anything post-cult, I think, a full recovery of a cult mind would include a real thorough inventory, sort of self-inventory of how do I think the world is supposed to be? What's the natural order of things? Quote unquote, right? To me, from my point of view, how do I think things should look? I think there could be a lot of insight if you were to take some time and write out, you know, a couple paragraphs of how you think the world should look. What is the natural order of things? Like I said, answer those questions for yourself, describe what those are, and I think you'll find in former cult members, you know, if there are lingering cult stuff, you'll find it in those write-ups, right? That kind of thing. It's just, you know, it's just an idea I have. I'm not bringing that out of some study or something, but, you know, it's like, like I said in the show, getting rid of the cult beliefs, the obvious stuff is easy. That's the, you know, getting rid of the spaceships and all that. That's the easy part. It's getting down to your idea of how the world should look and be structured. That's when you're getting deep. And when you can really start pulling the cult crap apart, you know, and it's fun. I personally, I think it's fun. It's a lot of work, but it's fun. Okay. Let's see here. We're coming up on 2:30 now, so I guess I should start speeding up and see if I can get through the rest of these and wrap it up for today. You guys have been awesome. Let's see here. Andrea Bauer. From what I've read about Hubbard, I feel like he would give speeches in the same style as Trump. Do Scientologists like Trump because of how similar he sounds, spewing nonsense in circles to Hubbard? You know, that's a really good point. And it's one I would have argued against when I first got out, which tells you something, right? Like, oh, no, Hubbard was not that nonsensical. What do you mean, right? Like, it took me a while before I could go back to Hubbard's lectures and realize how full of shit he was and how like crazy some of his statements sound, because I spent years making it all make so much sense. It took a while before it started like, wait a minute, this never made sense, you know? And that's kind of where the space that Trumpsters are in when they listen to him. And there's other things going on there too, of course, but that's, you know, kind of part of it is you can make this gibberish make sense. Whoa, right? It's wild. Do I think that's one reason why some ex-Scientologists listen to Trump? Sure, I'll say that. Yeah, sure, that could be one reason. That he is somehow in their minds resonates with Hubbard somehow, or has characteristics that Hubbard had that appeal to them, sure, I will readily agree with that. I don't see any reason why that wouldn't be the case. There might be other reasons as well. It wouldn't just be because Trump reminds them of Hubbard. There are, remember, ex-Scientologists tend to be conservative like Scientologists do. Hubbard had a very conservative / libertarian bent to him. His politics, his ideology was very much in that direction. No taxes, no income tax, fuck the IRS, small government, no interference. Everything I earn should be mine and nobody else gets any of it. It's this kind of attitude. This is very much imbued in Scientology philosophy. Nobody should ever get anything for free. There always should be exchange. Welfare programs are 100% wrong 100% of the time, right? It's only charity that is how the disabled or the unfortunate should be cared for. It should never be government programs or social welfare. Screw all of that, right? That is the Scientology attitude. And that has there's a lot of people in the extreme end of American GOP who say all of what I just said, right? They say all of that as though that's, the platform that everybody should be on. So that has a lot of appeal to certain ex-Scientologists. It does. Okay. Stuart asks, how would you say the idea that it usually takes a moral outrage breaking point to leave a cult interacts with your Taco Bell theory? I'll tell you exactly how. This is funny, but it's true. It's exactly how they intersect. The stomach aches, the body aches. I knew I was doing something bad to my body because I was in pain from the food I was eating. And that was the moral outrage. That was the break for me, was, this is actually hurting my body. This is supposed to be sustenance, right? I'm supposed to feel better after eating this. When I eat meals, I don't want to have a stomach ache and want to throw up afterwards. And that's exactly the effect it was creating on me. So I think that's kind of where that intersects in a real plain, way of saying it. That's the cramps and the stomach aches and the nausea. That was my moral outrage, right? And again, I had to hit it a couple times before it finally pierced the veil of, but Taco Bell's so good, No, it's not. It's not. There's nothing good about it. Same thing with McDonald's. I don't eat McDonald's anymore for the same reason. Okay, Joe DeCeppo, what day is Sea Org Day? This is the second time I think this has come up today, so let me find out. I think it's in August. August 12th. Yep, that's it. Sea Org, Scientology holiday. Okay, good. Carry on. John O'Nolan, what was the biggest ideal org in America besides anything in California or Florida? Okay, because all the big ones are in California or Florida. So the biggest one outside of those, size-wise, I believe the largest one outside of California would be Twin Cities. That's a 90,000 square foot building. I think that's the largest one. I think it's bigger than Kansas City's. Can't be 100%, but I think it is. It's not bigger than the Stevens Creek, San Jose one, but that's in California. So I think Twin Cities is the biggest one. As far as public, they're all such small, struggling orgs, man. I mean, when you say biggest, it's like, well, do you mean it has 10 people on course on Wednesday night or 11, right? I mean, these orgs are tiny. They are, Twin Cities, Kansas City, Albuquerque, Las Vegas, Salt Lake City, St. Louis. Then you have the East U.S. orgs, right? Atlanta, some of the, New Haven, Battle Creek, Detroit. Chicago, celebrities, what it was, Nashville, CC Nashville, right? I mean, I'm kind of just, you know, mentally going through the U.S. states here and naming the orgs that are in them, and every one of these places are podunk, tiny places. There's nothing going on in them. You know, I mean, like I said, if they have 10 or 11 people on course on Wednesday night, which I say Wednesday night because that's the biggest night usually, of course, class attendance, you know, so I'll say Twin Cities. I'll default to that. OBG Foster, I'm not afraid I don't understand this question. If you could abbreviate clear and OT8, would it be punked? I'm sorry, I don't get it. I'm probably going to get it on the replay and feel really stupid, but I don't get it. Man, YouTube is sure putting in a lot of commercials. I guess I'm going to have to go back to the conservative commercials. I don't like having too many commercials for you guys. I hope you're not getting too bothered by them. I gotta pay that, gotta keep that rent over my head somehow. Get a roof over my head. But I hope they're not, I hope that's not inconveniencing you guys. Once a Witness asks, is the food at the Big Blue Cafeteria good? Can anyone buy food there? The food is not bad. They do a decent job of serving food to the public. Not to the staff, to the public. And not anyone can walk in and buy food, because like I couldn't. But theoretically, a non-Scientologist could walk into the Pack Cafe and buy something. They would be under observation the entire time. But theoretically, that could happen. But it's really built for Scientologists. Okay, Jono, do you have plans of one day writing a book that focuses on your time on the RPF? I did have plans to do that, and then the church went and shut down the RPF. And the urgency of getting that book written kind of went way down for me, because I was really interested in writing it as part of exposing Scientology, and now that that doesn't exist, it's exposing it historically, but it's not still doing that. And that's why my interest in doing that book went way down. I've still got the outline for it. I wrote a whole kind of chapter by chapter breakdown of what would be in that book. And it would be a back and forth between the RPF and the human rights and Scientology's sort of hypocritical adoption of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and how it violates every one of them. And I was going to use the RPF as a case study examples of how those human rights are violated. Now that it doesn't exist, right? Not quite the powerhouse book that I had originally envisioned. Do I still want to write that? In a way, yeah, at some point I do, and I'll probably revisit it in some form and maybe figure out how to reframe it or retheme it. Because as I've said, you know, just because they canceled the RPF doesn't mean that all the tools and practices of the RPF were canceled. Still stuff in there worth writing about. But I am very curious now, and there is no information forthcoming from anyone on this. But I am very curious how the Truth Rundown is being utilized in Scientology these days, since there's no RPF. Is that going to become a lost piece of tech? You know, as they say in Scientology, nobody gets a TRD anymore. That would be really good. Don't get me wrong, right? I'm not pushing for TRDs. That the Truth Rundown is that concentrated gaslighting procedure that they do on you, and it's powerful stuff. Arguably some of the most powerful stuff that Scientology can do to you. So that's why I'm wondering what's the current state of that, right? What about the FPRD, you know, sec checks and stuff like that? I just don't know what's happening in Scientology these days with that stuff, and nobody else does either. Nobody's talking about it. So I'd like to get more about that, because they could very easily tomorrow, David Miscavige can bring the RPF back or come up with another program of his own invention, just like he invented the whole. Miscavige is perfectly capable of inventing some other form of awful and calling it a disciplinary program and pushing people through it. And if he were to do that, right, that would be very interesting, and we would want to know about that and what he's doing. So I've always got my kind of ear to the ground to try to hear anything about that kind of thing, but so far, nothing whatsoever. So let me know if you hear anything about any of that, and that's kind of how I'm thinking about it these days. All right. Oh boy, gonna have to wrap up here. Joe DeCeppo, have you seen the Trump supporters carrying around jars of their own man juice? Utterly bizarre. I tell you, I did see that, and I'm at the point now where these people are their own satire, right? They parody themselves with their lame brain, ham-fisted, ridiculous nonsense. They're so desperate to own the libs that they will claim or take ownership of things they shouldn't be claiming or taking ownership of, right? They wear shirts that say, I'm voting for the felon. You know, dictator on day one, right? Like, they proudly take hold of thought-terminating cliches and ideas that are so blatantly, obviously, stupidly destructive and wrong, and they laugh about it. That's that opposite world effect that happens in cult members' minds because they can't agree with the reality of reality. They can't agree with the way things really are, so they have to make fun of it and ridicule it and parody it in order to make it okay for themselves to still think the way that they think. And we all do this. Every one of us does this. This is what making jokes are, you know, about serious situations and dark humor and all that. That's a kind of in the same ballpark as what these guys are doing, but it's so outrageously stupid and so blatantly wrong that by any metric, by any standard you wish to use, I'm not even talking about from a left-wing point of view. It's just, you're carrying around little cups of what? What? You're doing what? You just, you know, it defies any reason at all. And yet this is really happening in our world these days. You know, all I can think of at this point, because there's no mass intervention possible here. We don't live in that world. These people need help. At this point, these are sick people, and I'm talking about the flag flying, red hat wearing, you know, come walking around with people, like people who proudly want dictator on day one, right? This is a sickness. And I'm not saying that they're mentally ill. I'm just using that word to try to, you know, emphasize a point here that this is not normal behavior. It's way past normal. And these folks need some real help. And I don't know how they're going to get it. I don't know, because it's not the natural inclination of people who are not on their side to want to help them. And it's not their natural inclination to want help, right? They're so stuck in this. I just hope they wake up. I just really hope they do. All right. John O'Nolan asks, do you believe in the law of attraction, the power of the subconscious mind? Okay, I have to answer this quickly. So what I'm going to say, Jono, is no, I do not. Not in the sense of how it is mystically thought of or supernaturally thought of, that what you put out, you get back in as some kind of flowy energy field thing. I explained in some detail a couple weeks ago the pulling it in thing of Scientology, and how that is kind of this, let's create an energy vacuum and you'll pull things in, good and bad. I don't believe in any of that either, because I don't think that's a reflection of how reality is. I don't believe in spirits, and I don't believe in energy flows or reiki or any of this adjusting your magnet fields and all of this. I think that's all pseudoscientific nonsense. And so I can't go in that direction or agree with any part of that. It's not provable, it's not measurable, it's not usable, and it doesn't work. On top of all that, right? And in addition to not being measurable or repeatable, it just doesn't work. It's just a stupid idea. The universe is a chaotic, very not balanced place. The universe isn't seeking balance with you. You're nothing special to this universe, right? Or the world around you. You are just a part of it. And you have, with the kernel of life that you have within you, you have the ability to impact and make a change in your surroundings. That's what you have as far as I'm concerned. And what you do with that, your voice, your actions, you know, those are choices you make. And based on those choices, you're going to have consequences. You're going to have returns, intended and unintended. How you choose to write the story of your life will determine whether those consequences are something you feel you're in charge of. But that's just how you feel. It doesn't matter to me how you feel about it. Those consequences are going to happen regardless, right? And I don't necessarily believe in a kind of predestination. I don't think you're doomed to do future things. I don't see that way. I believe you do have choices, and I believe those choices matter, especially to your immediate life and those around you. And I think that that's how life is. As far as the subconscious mind goes, there is a subconscious mind in that your brain has processes occurring in it that you're not aware of. And you never will be. Most of what's going on in your brain is subconscious. It's below your awareness. So yes, I believe in a subconscious mind because I don't have to believe in it. It's right there, right? We know it exists. I don't think of the mind as only the brain. I think that it extends beyond us in terms of our social relationships and things like that. But I think it gets a little complicated to explain. So I'll just say that much. And that's what I've got for you on that one. Yeah, there you go. Okay, Leslie Bishop. Chris, have you ever seen the Phil Donahue interview with Heber Jetzch? I saw that exists, and I think I saw parts of it years and years ago, maybe even when it first aired. I remember Donahue. I remember watching Donahue, actually, when I was growing up. He was popular. Yeah, but so I kind of remember it, but I don't remember anything he said in it or anything like that. I didn't watch it that closely. Young Matador, did you ever have an encounter with someone similar to a stolen valor individual, i.e. someone posing as a Sea Org member or trying to exaggerate their own position within the church? It's going to sound weird. Of course, it's Scientology. But I can't remember the specifics of this, and it seems to me that this was after I had left the church. As an ex-member, I saw somebody arguing over whether they were a, what's the word? Honorary Sea Org member. There was the title, somehow this existed, this title of honorary Sea Org member exists. I can't remember why, but somebody was claiming to be an honorary Sea Org member. It was weird, and it seemed weird at the time. And it was along this line. They were trying to get credibility for something that they weren't. Maybe it might have been connected with a celebrity, maybe Tom Cruise or John Travolta or something. But it was along this line. For some reason, that whole thing made me think of that. Your question made me think of that whole thing, right? Because it had that kind of connection to it, that somehow this would be stolen Sea Org valor. Like that's a thing, you know. It's the closest I got for you. It was a long time ago. It was like when the first year that I got out, and I just remember some social media argument over that, and that's all I've got for you on that. It never happened while I was in, that's for sure. I never saw anything like that. You had anybody trying to claim they were a serial member who wasn't, they were going to get a punch in the face, you know, if you were on the base, that's for sure. Okay, Stuart Gorman, did they keep the IMAX theater at the Minneapolis org or change that space to something else? No, they kept it. It's their film room and public event space is this IMAX theater at that org. Yeah, they have it there. I believe the screen, I think they shrunk it down a little bit. I don't think it's the full IMAX. I might be wrong about that, but I think they changed the screen to make it a little smaller. But the theater is absolutely still there. Yeah. Okay, Matt B. Hey, Matt, as you begin to cover emotional needs, how much have you shifted away from advocating critical thinking as the solution to the cult problem? Well, Matt, I've combined these, as I said earlier in the show here today. For me, critical thinking, in the way I use it and talk about it and advise people to use it and think with it and do it, is a disciplinary exercise or activity akin to martial arts. It has a set of principles and ideas like logical fallacies, cognitive biases, logic trains, consequences, you know, intended, unintended consequences, all this kind of stuff. Logic, right? Reason, skepticism, Carl Sagan's Demon Haunted World as a book, right? The Baloney Detection Kit, the ways you go about flagging information, you know, literacy, I think propaganda literacy or some media literacy would be part of this in our modern world. Otherwise, how could you really do critical thinking if you're not literate in how to deal with the media or deal with social media and navigate it correctly, right? Or navigate it properly, as opposed to believing anything you read, for example, right? Which would not be navigating it properly, or very good critical thinking. But also on top of this, so because we're dealing with human beings, as I said earlier, you have got to add emotional intelligence to this picture. Otherwise, you've only got half the picture. And in fact, less than half the picture, because cognitive function is not all that's going on up here or going on with our behavior. A great deal of what we're dealing with ourselves and other people is driven by our emotions and emotional reactions in the moment and emotional needs, which carry us through our entire life and drive our behavior. And if you don't understand that and you can't get your wits around how that works and how emotions can shut off thinking, then you're not going to be a very good critical thinker, because you're not going to understand half of the process of what's going on in your thinking. And that's why I put them together. And it's not an either or, it's both. And they used to be thought of as separate things. And some people poo-poo this and say that they don't even know what critical thinking is. And critical thinking, it could be anything you want it to be. Bullshit. Critical thinking is a very specific thing. I just said what it is. And it's not some airy-fairy set of ideas. We can write all this down and define it very specifically. And that's what I'm trying to do here. So I think of it pretty specifically and pretty precisely, at least as far as I'm concerned. I think I do. I think these are pretty good definitions. You guys let me know if I'm off or there's things I'm not including. I really do want the criticism, because I want to know what else should I be talking about here, or how else should I be thinking about or describing this. I want to do this right. This kind of stuff that we're talking about right now is important stuff for me on my channel. So I do want to get this right. Okay, so yeah, because I do advocate for critical thinking as a solution to the cult problem. I just include the emotional components of it so that it's a well-rounded thing, right? As I said. All right, so last one here, and then we'll wrap up. If a therapist suggested you try Reiki, what would your response be? No, I'm not doing that. And I would actually question why my therapist would even recommend something like that to me. Clearly, they don't know me, and clearly they don't know what the fuck they're talking about, because anybody who's recommending Reiki as a therapeutic modality should have their head examined. It is absolutely nothing but a straight up waste of your money. You'd be better off burning your money in a fireplace, because at least you know you're wasting your money. You know, I have very strong feelings about con artists and people who do crap like that. And I really don't like it. It really makes me mad, right? The people getting taken advantage of with magnets and chakra therapy and Reiki and energy flows and fields. And people do this crap over Zoom. They don't even have to see you in person and they'll rip you off. It's bad out there, right? There are serious con people. I've seen their websites. I've seen their literature. I've seen what they do. It's gross. I've seen them do it over Zoom, adjusting people's flows. It is sickening to watch. I would never tolerate a therapist trying to tell me to go do something like that. I would literally report them. That's I have strong emotions about that. Okay. All right, guys. Okay, so there we go. That's what I got for you. And on that happy note, I'm going to wrap up. Yeah, I'm not planning on a live stream during the week this week. I've got to kind of get full tilt boogie on writing some more. So I will see you guys this coming up Friday, unless something changes on that. Obviously, you'll be the first to know. Thanks for coming around and watching. I hope that if you need me for anything in terms of consultation, one-on-one, you want to talk to me about stuff, I am wide open for that. You can contact me anytime. You can email me at askchrisshelton@gmail.com or through my website, and we can connect up, and maybe I can help you. All right, with that, let's wrap up. Bye-bye.